Cass, welcome back to my channel, whatcassread. Today I am bringing you a video that I've been thinking about for a while, but I've been on a journey for the last year and maybe just over a year, and that journey has been reading romance. It's not my go-to genre. It was a big step out of my comfort zone for me. And so I want to talk about how it went, how it's going, and whether or not I'll be continuing on with the genre. All right, so if you're interested in what I have to say, let's get to it. Okay, so like I said, also welcome back to my bedroom. I have to film in here again because my son came home and I wanted a quiet space. And this door I can actually lock. So anyways, welcome back to my bedroom. We're gonna chat about romance books on my bed. So over the past year, just over a year, I've been reading romance books, and I can really say that it is all down to one booktuber in particular that made me want to explore the genre. And then I discovered more booktubers, etc., etc. So that booktuber is Crystal's Bookish Life. The way that she talks about romance made me consider, like, is this something that you should give a try? Because her main way that she talks about romance is she really talks about the connection of the characters. And over a year ago, I was just in a really bad spot mentally. So my go-to genres, fantasy, sci-fi, horror, mystery, thriller, like all of those just seemed to be like too much for me, and I couldn't do it, but I still wanted to read. So when Crystal was just kind of promoting all of these books and talking about character connections, it really made me reconsider about what the genre is about, and that it's not just all fluff, right? A lot of the books that I read were from her recommendation, where I started from, and then I cast a very wide net from there just to see what type of romance reader I feel like I am. And yeah, so I don't have any fantasy romance in this video because fantasy romance for me was like a given. I was gonna read a fantasy romance probably regardless of whether or not I tried romance. The books that I want to talk about today are the books that really were like outside of my comfort zone, and books that I typically would not have picked up if I wasn't kind of in this exploratory phase in my reading journey. So I have discovered, after casting such a wide net, and I'm talking about, I read everything from dark romance, taboo romance, what did I read? Sports romance, cowboy romance, small town romance, contemporary, holiday romance, historical romance, rock star romance. Like, there were so many different subgenres to just kind of like dip my toes into. And by casting that wide net, it really kind of like honed me in on the types of things that I really love. And I have discovered after this year plus of reading, just over a year, that I am a historical romance girly, and I'll read some contemporary romances, but not all of them work for me. And if I'm gonna DNF a romance, it is more likely to be a contemporary style romance than it would be a historical romance. So that's very interesting, just like reflection. So I have four. I have four standout historical romance reads that I think about these all the time. These are authors that I return to, and the amount of historical romance books that I have on my shelves now versus when I started this journey is pretty high. And I just ordered some books for Black Friday, and a good chunk of those were also historical romances. But I'm just finding that I'm able to get more absorbed into the story when it's in a historical setting versus a contemporary setting. And to me, that's really kind of what I need as a reader. I need to be able to like lose myself in the world, in the plot, in the characters, which is why I love fantasy, sci-fi, horror. This also kind of like is the flip side of why, like, I also don't love urban fantasy. I don't love my fantasy books to be in contemporary settings. And I really think it is just that like contemporary setting that just throws me off, and it's not going to set me up for a good reading experience. But yeah, I've read a ton of historicals. I read the entire Lisa Kleypas, Wallflowers, Ravenels. I read all of the Bridgerton books. I'm currently reading the Smythe-Smith Quartet. So I've just been, you know, going in very deep, very hard. But the first historical romance author that I read, I know I've talked about this book, and I have to talk about this author again. This is Kerrigan Byrne. This is The Highwaymen. This is the first book in the, I want to say Gentleman Bastard series. That is Scott Lynch. That's a fantasy. So this is the first book in a historical romance series, and all of the heroes in this historical romance series are men of like dubious professions. It gets a little bit dark, and I think that's what gripped me from the beginning. Like, I have discovered by dipping my toes into some of these more darker characters, then I could like really plow through the historical romance reads. So this tells the story of Farah. She is our heroine. She, you know, had this childhood love that she got separated from, and now she's in London, and she has a very, very powerful secret. That's right. She has a very, very powerful secret, and she needs protection because there are people that are after her for this secret. And so it's kind of got all the tropes of long lost heirs. Turns out that's a trope I really love. Childhood love, and what does it mean for you as an adult when you come into your adulthood, but you're still thinking about your childhood love. I love a good Scottish character, and that I've always known I've loved that because I've read the entire Outlander series except for book number 9. So I was always going to be a little bit more prone to some Scottish heroes as well. So it's this, I feel like you need to give a try if you are thinking about reading historical romance, because if you're coming from my perspective as a fantasy reader and you like to read some of those like pretty dark, gritty, grimy fantasy worlds, this is a good tie-over, because we have some very brutal things that happen to our characters in this book, and if you're used to reading that kind of brutality in your fantasy characters, I think it's going to make you fall in love with these characters and even more. And just the romance is like super sweeping, and it turns out I am someone who needs that in my life. I didn't know that about myself until now. The other one kind of in that vein, this is another author. I've only read 3 of her books, and I want to read more. She's one of the authors that I bought a bunch for Black Friday. This is Lorraine Heath, and so this book is called She Tempts the Duke. This is the Lost Lords of Pembroke series, and this is another one that's like a childhood lovers. It follows 3 brothers. Their parents were killed, and these were supposed to be the 3 young lords who would inherit their family's title, estate, and everything like that, but their uncle is the one who kind of overthrew everything, and he took everything for himself. And so they had to get out of town, and they're very, very young men. Like, the youngest one is still like primary school age, and the older ones are more like early teenagers, but certainly not ready to be out on their own. But they really had to get out of town and disappear. And what can 3 young boys do? They disappear into like the underworld. So you had one who kind of went aboard a ship, never to return. You had one who disappeared into the army, and you had one who grew up on the streets of London. This was super exciting, gritty, dark. Turns out I love that. And just like, I love a good vengeance. Like, we need to get revenge on someone who overthrew our kingdom and overthrew our power. That's a very common thing that you'll see in fantasy, and it comes in this one. So Lorraine Heath is an author that I've turned out to really love. I think about that story all the time. And then I mentioned Lisa Kleypas, and she made me realize that I can love lighthearted historical romance, as long as there's just like a really great, solid, swoony love story. So it was just kind of like I dipped my toes into the dark stuff and then gave the lighthearted stuff a try, and it turns out if it's written by a great author, I can handle light, fluffy romances. Who knew? So this is Again the Magic by Lisa Kleypas. This is considered a prequel to The Wallflowers and the Ravenels. But this is the story about Lady Aline, and who's the hero? McKenna. Lady Aline, she is the lady of this estate. She's the daughter of the Earl or something. Anyway, she's the young lady of the estate. She's set to inherit. And McKenna, he's the stable boy. He works in the stables. And if there's one thing that I love in a romance is I love a little class divide, a little class division. So they were forced to separate as young children because it was improper for them to kind of begin a romance because of their stations in life. And now McKenna has returned into Lady Aline's life, and he wants to make her miserable because he feels that that whole family really wronged him. It is a very swoony romance. And this was the first indication to me that I can read lighthearted, swoony romances without dark conflicts as well. And then an author that just took my heart, and she is an author that I want to read a book of hers before the end of the year, so maybe you'll get to see another video with me talking about her, but it is Beverly Jenkins. One of the things that I like about romance as a genre is that it does afford more diverse characters than a lot of fantasy out there. But you just have to know where to look. Now, the contemporary romance genre, you'll find a lot more of that than you will in the historical genre, or in the historical romance subgenre. And Beverly Jenkins writes Black historical romance, and rip my heart out. It is so good. So Hester and Galen are our two main characters, and Hester is a former slave. She has been freed, but she used to work on the indigo plantations when she was young, and so her hands have been stained the deep dye color that indigo has. So that kind of like tells everybody what she used to do, but she managed to be able to escape her way and gain her freedom in the north. And Galen is a notorious, he's a freed man, but he assists slaves on the Underground Railroad, and he assists them in their various stops. So this is how the two of them come together. It's so good. Beverly Jenkins makes me think about my country just in new and fresh ways, just things that it never occurred to me. Some of the importance of some of the cities in my country that were stops in the Underground Railroad during the Civil War. So like this one takes place like pretty outside Detroit, Michigan. And it never occurred to me how pivotal of a city that would be, that would have such a pivotal role in helping slaves escape to their freedom to Canada. And that was a big like choke point for a bunch of people to get to Detroit so that way they could cross the border and get into Canada. And it talked about the significance of the New Orleans Black experience during the Civil War, because Galen is a member of one of the wealthiest free Black families in New Orleans during this time, and that was also something that existed during that time. So like you can have Black experiences in the Deep South where they are free during the Civil War, and what were their relationships to what was going on in the country. Oh, it was so good. It was so good. If you like historical fiction, regardless of your love of romance, you should read Indigo by Beverly Jenkins. You should just read Beverly Jenkins. In my quest for finding good romance books, it's harder for me to find the more contemporary romance reads. And so the two that I have that I want to talk about are two independently published contemporary romances. Those seem to hit with me a little bit differently than some of the traditionally published ones. but I'm willing to give traditionally published ones a shot. It's just, I just don't feel like I will like them. You know what I mean? You kind of get a feeling for what books are in your wheelhouse or not. An author that I will gladly try anything from is Kennedy Ryan. Kennedy Ryan was a big, big recommendation from Crystal, from Crystal's Bookish Life. And this is the series that I started with. She's got more series that I want to read. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. This is what contemporary dark romance, dark sports romance should strive to be. So this is a dark romance because it does talk about DV and the issues surrounding DV and couples that shouldn't be together but are. And so it's got a wonderful meet cute of this woman and this man in a bar. They're watching a basketball game on TV and they just, strike up a conversation because they're both basketball fans, and this guy discovers that this girl really knows what she's talking about. And he is a elite college basketball player. He's in the national championship game. And so he's talking to this girl. He's like, man, I should really get her number. So when he finally decides to exchange numbers with her, she's like, I know who you are. And she goes, I'm going out with so-and-so. And the man that she is currently going out with is one of the other elite college basketball players that our hero is facing in the national championships. And they are, trying to get first pick in the draft. These are very high stakes for these two young men, and they've kind of circled each other in their whole basketball careers because they've all gone to the same basketball camps, and they've, tried to get with the same schools and ended up having to play each other all the time. It's a forbidden love between the two of them because there's a real connection there. And it talks about some of the consequences of DV in ways that I just haven't found in many of the dark romances that I read. This makes you reflect on what those relationships do to a person, to your family members, to the people who love you. It's so good. It's so good. It's very, very trigger heavy for DV. But if you can do it, if you can handle that kind of content, this is the one. I think about this book all the time. It's a trilogy. It's the first book in a trilogy. And while I enjoyed the trilogy as a whole, this one remains my favorite. I just love it. I've reread it already. I've reread it twice. And then this one is just a very deep aching, we root for this person who is in the throes of the darkest periods of their life. So this is The Words, written by Ashley Jade. This is a very popular indie romance. This is a dark rock star romance, and the content is dark because these two characters, one of them, our hero, he kind of grew up with drug abusive parents and people who didn't really care about him, but he had an amazing gift for writing songs. And so it's his trajectory and his rise to fame as a rock star. And then the young heroine is a girl he knew from high school, and kind of how they started to become friends, what happened to them along his trajectory to fame, and what happens when they end up having to reconnect as adults. And it's sad, it's heartbreaking. I feel like Kennedy Ryan's a better writer than Ashley Jade, but this story just couldn't let me go. It couldn't let me go. And I think about this one all the time. All right, so those were just some books that I just had to talk about. Just my journey as a romance reader has taught me lots of things that for a contemporary romance to have to stick with me, I really do kind of subscribe to Crystal's outlook for romance. I need to feel a real connection between the two characters, and I need some humanity in there. I'm just not the right audience for fluff. Unless it's a historical romance, which apparently I can handle fluff in a historical romance. So Yeah, this is what I've discovered about myself. Reading romance for the last year. I definitely plan on continuing reading the genre because I've now kind of like squiggled around and found what I liked, and some authors that I'm just really anxious to try. If you have any suggestions, please feel free to list them in the comment section below, now that you know what I like. Yeah, I've read Elsie Silver, I've read Catherine Cowles, I've read some Devney Perry. So I've read a lot of like the indie published contemporary authors, which I think I will still plan to give them a try. But to be honest, I actually haven't read anything by like Emily Henry. I haven't read Abby Jimenez. I haven't read any Christina Lauren. Yeah, so it's really interesting. Like, I haven't gone the traditionally published contemporary romance route. But if there's any out there that you think like, I think you should try this one, please let me know. And I'm willing to give it a shot. I think I want to start filming a series of like reading outside my comfort zone. And so you might see some of those like books that I just mentioned, contemporary romance authors, in the reading outside my comfort zone. And so if you're interested in that, you know, let me know. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Go ahead, give this a like, comment, subscribe. If you have made it this far into the video, please go ahead and put a microphone emoji for The Words by Ashley Jade. And all my social media links, my small business links, everything is down in the comment section below. You know how these videos end. I'll talk to you later. Bye.